Alrighty, well, yeah, this is session 4 of Songwriting Fundamentals. I'm Brad Elias. Uh, uh, I always like to start this thing out with talking about something. The thing that I want to talk about this time around is, again, to talk about these songwriting fundamental. This is about songwriting. I think composition is a larger piece of the thing than songwriting. Songwriting is a small subset because these won't apply, we talked about in the past, to like soundtrack music or ambient music or jazz music. This applies specifically to, I want to write a song like a singer-songwriter, like a traditional song. So some of this can be applied across, but some of it can't. Okay, so we were talking in the past, somebody actually mentioned it a couple of weeks back about how it doesn't really matter what your lyrics are, what your melody is, what your arrangement is. If your performance is amazing, it doesn't matter whether you're doing "Mary Had a Little Lamb" or you're doing it, a classical piece or something like that. It doesn't matter. It's all about the performance. That's why I left this to the end. He was absolutely true. You can get to the very end and have this wonderful, perfect song, and if you can't deliver it, if you can't put it in the air to be heard, it's not a song, and it's probably not going to work. So the first thing you have to decide on here, this is where I'm scrolling. The first thing you've got to decide on is, are you going to go live or are you going to go studio? One of the things I always say is, I need to get close to my thing. Yeah, does the studio actually capture the subtlety of the song, and does live does the studio capture the emotion of the song, and does the live capture the subtlety? Very often it's a toss-up. I have a tendency to like to record live and then fix the live. I don't like recording sort of piecemeal because to me it doesn't have that feel of the thing. But again, that's just my own personal production style. And like I said, mistakes, I have a tendency to leave mistakes in there as character for the song, as opposed to making it all exactly quantized and set up exactly the way it's supposed to be. So those are the kinds of questions. And again, these aren't good or bad things. These are just decisions you have to make while you're going into this thing. What's going to make this song the best? The one thing I always like to ask is this going to be a definitive performance, or is this just a representative performance? I have a tendency to like to do representative performances. Does it sound like the song? Does it give the song? I don't know how to do that definitive stuff. And to me, a lot of times when we agonize over stuff over and over again to try to get that definitive sound, to try to get that Hotel California sound, we have a tendency to lose sort of the soul of the song. Anyway, that's my pitch against overproduction. This is really important. I think if a song works, it's going to work as a solo song. Almost, And again, we're talking song, not composition. I'm not going to sit there and ask Frank Zappa to do something, as a solo performance, although he could probably pull it off. But when I heard Pete Townsend do "Won't Get Fooled Again" and Behind Blue Eyes as solo acoustic guitar, you could recognize the songs. If you had never heard those songs would have worked just like that, and that would have been the only version that you'd want to hear. It was just so astonishing. But try to make sure that the song works well by itself. And again, if you're doing it in a studio, how do you get that feel? You got to sort of keep working on that. Do you want to do it with a band, or you want to do it solo? Putting together a band is really tough, and I use McCartney as an example of it. McCartney put together a band of friends, but then he added some ringer musicians because he wanted to have these real good, beefy musicians. Well, all the good musicians bailed on him, and only the friends stuck around, and they made Band on the Run. So, I say I like having a band of friends rather than a band of killer musicians. I'm playing a gig this coming a week from today that is going to be with a bunch of friends, so that'll be fun. More enjoyment going on. Do you hand parts out? When I was writing songs for my band in the '80s, I was literally giving them the parts, not handing them sheet music or anything, but saying, hey, you know what, the drum sounds like a Neil Young drum thing. The guitar solo, let's go a little Dave Gilmour on that one, and the feel is more like a this or a that. And you give them sort of direction, and you try to give them parts, and then they play within their stuff. If you've got a good enough band, or you know your band well enough, you can actually write for those parts. When you think of like Springsteen writing for the E Street Band, he knows Max is going to be banging away on this thing, so he writes for that. You can write to the band, or you can write away from the band, or you can just let the band jam. You can start playing it, and I'm not sure where it's supposed to go, and it just starts going, and that's the way it's supposed to go. Um, so the lowest common denominator, I think very often that is sometimes, I want to say, the most accessible thing you can do. So if you boil it down, if you keep simplifying it down to where it's not derivative, and yet still easy to maintain, easy to follow along, that's sort of the sweet spot. Again, I don't follow my own advice. I love busy stuff. I know we all love the busy stuff, but the breakdown where you have only 3 tracks, my gosh, those could be way more powerful than the 25 tracks that sound and fury signifying nothing. Um, Consider the audience of the venue. Sometimes I'll have 2 different versions. That's a cool thing about writing this Epithumia thing. I just did a reggae version of a song that was um, this big operatic thing. So you can sort of take and recast your songs back and forth. I like, and again, for different groups. All of a sudden, we're in a situation where we got some new musicians. Well, let's figure out where the guitar solos go, and all the new stuff to try people out. And like I said, the audience, you got to sort of identify what is your audience's expectation going to be, and can you get them to participate? And that could be live or virtual. And again, I think recording in the studio, as I said, under arrangement, recording in the studio is like recording a jam band. Because it's what's rattling around in your head until it becomes something real. It's just sort of a jam happening. But you need to make connections, and I think very often, either live or your first note, your introduction is setting the mood, is setting the piece, is setting the. Do you start off with it's like a standalone vocal part? Do you start with do you pull in the hook into the very intro, or do you start off small and with nothing? There's all sorts of stuff you can do. Breaks and asides. One of the sides I always like to do is in the live version of Stairway to Heaven, Robert Plant does. Does anybody remember Laughter? And the whole audience just erupts, and they're back into that song because it's at this low point of the song, and boom, man! All of a sudden, the energy just swells up again, and they get set for the next buildup of the song. Those little asides, you can even capture them in your recording, and sometimes those are the hooks that connect you with the audience. Sing along stuff. If you're live, you can teach a part. I wrote a song specifically with one word and one note, so that everybody just has to sing the word flow on a D, and that's all they got to do. And they're my background singers now. So you can give clapping again. If you got a good rhythm, you got to try to give the audience something to clap along to. Hooks again. We talked about that all over the place. Okay, next question. Your vocal. To me, this is the thing that can kill or make a thing, and that's why I've decided not to record myself that much anymore. I think I'm killing more than I'm surviving my songs. So to me, finding another vocalist to sing your stuff, I think is, if you're trying to make it commercial, I think that's a really great way to go. because you can hear those folks literally. You can hear a room full of people singing and say those three people there are the ones that I want singing on my songs, because they're the ones with those crystal clear voices. They don't falter in their notes. They have that something inside of them, and that's the thing, that magic, that what is that makes it. I personally, I think Wayne's got a little bit of that. I sort of did four basic categories of what type of voices. And again, these aren't, it's not exclusive. There's a whole bunch of these, but these are ones that sort of, in my mind, when I hear somebody sing and I go, oh, I love that, I sort of shove them into one of these bins, or maybe they don't fit in one of these bins. One of them is what I call the plaintive wail. It's the damsel in distress. It's the babe crying in the wilderness. It's that voice that you hear that you just go, oh, my heart is melting. I will do anything for this person. Help me get them out. I think of great soul singers, baby, please, please kind of vocals. They can get that plaintive wail going on there. The heroic shout, again, going back to the Who, what's better than Won't Get Fooled Again, that huge shout at the beginning of it. My gosh, those are the types of voices that can just, again, resonate, boom across and grab you no matter who you are. I call it the secret invitation. This could be like a trickster invitation. I think of like Prince songs, or a seductress or a seductor kind of invitation. Prince is always, it feels like he's trying to call you into his little red Corvette. You're constantly being pulled into his world by his almost a whispery tone, pulling you in and pulling you in. And the other one is world weary, and that's where I would put Lou Reed and Dylan and Leonard Cohen. Who would want Leonard Cohen to sing? Oh, I would, because he's got that world weary thing. And yeah, so. The other thing is stupid human tricks. When David Lee Roth came along, it's like, holy cow, what's that guy's voice doing? David Letterman always had the stupid pet tricks, and then he started the stupid human tricks. And that, to me, those stupid human tricks, I try to find those in my voice. The growl that I can get that just is, the times when your voice cracks and it sounds good as opposed to like your voice is cracking. Those kind of things, lean into that. Do those stupid human tricks. And the other thing, what you were saying earlier, it's confidence. It's confidence more than ability. And I actually think that singers are more actors than they are singers. I think it's the unearned confidence of an actor in a role, They are not King Lear. How dare they think that they're King Lear up there saying King Lear's lines? It's that unearned confidence, and a vocalist sort of needs to have that. If you're not confident in your voice, it's gonna come off hesitant and it's gonna have problems. Okay, harmonies. There's all sorts of different kinds of harmonies. I like the second lead. The second lead is great because you don't have to stay a third away. You can bounce around and you can make it a little bit more melodic, and you can do the two lines together. If you add the third line in, all of a sudden you got to start thinking about, well, where are we in the chord now? And and when you start doing groups or choirs, it gets even more complicated. So you end up sort of dropping those guys down to sort of a different, here's the lead, as Jay was saying, here's the lead stuff, and all the background stuff sort of has to fall behind. But if you got the two leads, you can bring them both up. And that to me is a really gorgeous sound. The trio, I like trios a lot. And if they're tight harmonies, they could be just wonderful. But again, you have to be really careful about that. Counterpoint. Counterpoint. The one thing I want to say about counterpoint is very often we have a tendency to, as I said it under arrangement, starting everything sort of the same way. Da 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 da. Da 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 da. What's the next line? Da 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 da. And the last line, da 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 da. So there's your song. So there's the rhythm of the song. The counterpoint would be da 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 da. You would have it staggered. You would be coming in at a different point, and it's not just a call and response. It's a Sloop John B is the one that I'll use an example. So hoist up, Sloop John B. Hoist up, Sloop John B. It's sort of like a call and response at that point. But when they let me go home, all of a sudden the voices start coming in all over the place, and it. Anyway, there's a power in that counterpoint, but they sort of almost have to be written as standalone melodies and then meshed together. That's a tough one to do, but I love doing it. Um, when to enunciate? If you're doing a double lead, you could probably do fairly solid enunciation. But if you're doing background or choir, they tell you to use what they call soft consonants. Don't hiss your S's. Don't tap your T's. Make everything sort of that your tongue sort of flops up against the roof of your mouth in an N almost like. So if the lead singer is singing glass, you don't want to hit the G and the S at the end. You sort of want to go last. You want to just hit the note. You're providing vowel sounds to the mix, especially as you drop farther and farther down in the mix. You give yourself less and less enunciation. But anyway, that's just a sort of a vocal technique style. Okay, priorities. Yeah, so when you're doing a song, you always have to sit there and say, well, what are we trying to do here? Is the words the most primary thing? Then the music has to sort of fall down and support and make sure your lyrics. Stuff I'm doing, of course, is very lyric heavy. I'm telling a story. So my voice is always just way pushed way too hot. And it's also a folk singer and a songwriter, singer-songwriter kind of thing. James Taylor, his voice is way out there. Is the music primary and the vocal becomes a little bit more subservient. That's like, dance stuff. You don't really care about what the day, everybody have fun tonight, everybody Wang Chung tonight. Who cares? It's get that music going. And it's same thing with classical. The classical, I was listening, unfortunately, to Tchaikovsky's Maid of Orleans, and it's in Russian. And it's like, holy cow, I was having a real tough time listening to Russian being sung. But I think most of rock and pop and they want the individual to shine. So that's why somebody mentioned earlier the lyrics and the melody and the arrangement. You're trying to make the individual shine. Does the sax solo sound amazing? Does that guitar riff sound amazing? Is that vocalist just shining? And so it's very much about the individual performances. So again, just another different way of slicing it. How do we layer instrumentation? So does everybody come in all at once? Is it is a born to run moment where everybody just comes in full guns, or do you bring them in slowly at a time? And how do you especially if you're in a band, how do you tell your drummer you got to sit out for the first 3 minutes of this one, dude? You give him a shaker. That's a tough one. That's why friends help out. Friends, go get a beer, dude. But featured entrances. Very often I like being able to ladder things in. You bring in one thing at a time and you sort of work through it. And you give them each a time to shine. You just got out of a chorus. You got a little 4-bar thing before you get to the next verse. Introduce the piano. Introduce a flute. Introduce something fun. Um, Yeah, I sometimes abrupt. If you got a little quiet part and all of a sudden everybody comes in, that sometimes is really good. Changing of parts, yeah. So if all of a sudden it's an acoustic guitar song and you're playing along with the acoustic guitar and it's running along just fine, what if the acoustic guitar drops out on the second verse and it's taken over by the piano or an organ or a something else? That kind of stuff. I think adds interest to the stuff. Drops and breaks. It's all about timing and communication. that's sometimes really tough. Did I miss something? I think I missed something. I did. I missed something up here. I forgot about parallel lines. I wanted to talk about parallel lines real quick. Um, Parallel lines. When you sing a line and then you want to put a harmony to that line, there are harmonies that sound good and harmonies that sound okay, and harmonies that just are going to sound dissonant. Um, in my training, in my musical training, and in my own ears, the things that sound good are sixths and thirds. It's like a it's a it's just a transposition of the same notes. You know, it's a B and a G. Do you, where does the B go and where does the G go? It doesn't matter. It's those the B and the G, and they move up and they down. They move in parallel. That sounds very fluid and very nice and very melodic. If you use a fifth or a fourth, which is again just a reverse of each other, if you use that fifth and a fourth and you play it all by itself, it sounds not dissonant, but it just sounds a little unsettling. Sounds like it's a fanfare, or sounds like it might be, so like a chopsticks style, kind of a bit of a clunky sounding. So I have a tendency to avoid parallel fifths. And sometimes you can't if you got them singing a trio and they sing up and down. The third in the middle helps you out. You know, the third in the middle helps you out. But what you really would like to do is you want your outside to be a sixth and the inside to be the middle guy, whether it's a fourth or a fifth on the inside. That parallel will work a lot better because then it doesn't necessarily go in parallel. That middle guy, that's the fourth or a fifth, will actually move around as you move up and down the scale. It'll be a fourth or a fifth. It'll be bouncing back and forth and be a little bit less of that parallel sound. And again, don't have my keyboard out to demonstrate it for you, but that was one of the things that I wanted to point out. I see a lot of that in what you call untrained musicians, a lot of parallel fifth stuff, and again, it's just it's a sound that to me has a tendency to be a bit more, I don't know, not dissonant, but sort of just a harder not as melodic, not as fluid. And again, it can be used to effect. Like I say, it can be used to an effect to be unsettling or to be, we're having a bad day, and so we go down in parallel fifths. Okay. So I didn't mean to click whatever I clicked. So yeah, the timing is everything. If the band's not together, don't try it. Or if you want to have everybody drop out ragged and come in together, or you know what I mean? It depends upon how you can play it because if you do a drop or a break and it doesn't work, or it's worse than if you didn't do it. The last thing I want to talk about is sort of the goal of the song. It's not like how to do it, but sort of, what do you want the process of writing a song to give you at the end of the thing? And I sort of split it out, and this is probably not exclusive as well. Do you want to be entertaining? Do you just want to make people smile and have fun and engage and have a good time? That's a perfectly viable reason to do this thing. Just have fun, just do it and have fun, and you're enjoying yourself doing it. The second one is to get attention, and again, in a good way and a bad way. Do you want to highlight your skills? Do you want to try to market something? Is the attention trying to get pull out your stupid human tricks so that you get oh, look at what he can do. He can do that fun thing with his voice or with his guitar finger or his rattly thing. Do you want to communicate? A lot of mine, I put communication really high up. I like communicating. I usually write a song when I've come to a decision or come to a realization, or have found the framework around which I can understand a certain subject. I like writing songs like that, which don't make them as happy pop songs all the time. But you got to be specific and clear, and yeah. So good luck with that. Persuade, that's even worse. I've tried to write some persuasion songs. They're also called advice songs. So advice or persuasion songs, you should do this, you should do that, you should do, and it's like, I usually try to flip it around and say, I should do this, I should do that, but sometimes you can't help it and you just feel like, man on your lawn, get off my lawn, take my advice, vote the way I want you to vote. Set a mood. Sometimes you just want to set a mood, man. You just sit there and you have that thing running through your head, and everybody and then there's the song, and it doesn't matter. Like I said, the other three things don't really matter. What it was about was the mood and the consistency of the song. Again, that's one where you have to hit it right at the front. You got to get that mood in that first opening bar, or the mood is broken, obviously. And the last one, of course, is what we all love to do is everything's a success because all of this is experimental. So I try to do all of my stuff experimentally. Anyway, so I think that's the end of my talking.